Welcome back, everybody, to the Always Bayern Chelsea show. This is an extremely special edition of the show for so many reasons. One, as you can see if you're watching this on video on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's a video episode. And two, we're in the same place at the same time, so the energy is going to be electric. And three, this is our season prediction episode special extravaganza. Welcome.
Predictions, previews, all the things you need before you head into an EPL, a Bundesliga, a Champions League season, whether you're a Bayern fan, a Chelsea fan, or a fan of every team in the world. Because maybe there's somebody out there that heavily follows every single team. I know there's got to be at least one person out there that does that.
And if there is, I'd love to have you on the show, and I'd love to know how you have the time to do it because I want to be you.
That person is an encyclopedia of knowledge of the sport of football. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Well said, well put. So this is going to be a fun one. And if you remember, we at the end of this last season, 24-25, we took a stroll down memory lane and looked at our predictions from the beginning of the year. So hopefully we'll do that at the end of this year and probably laugh at ourselves or pat ourselves in the back by how much we knew.
And we'll probably know a lot this year because we are experts at this point. And it's going to be great to see at the end of the year because I know for a fact all my predictions that I have on here are going to be accurate. And not only that, but if I may add here, if you're watching on YouTube, listening, you got to watch because let's just say my girl Selena gave me a nice fresh cut right before this. So you're going to want to tune in for that.
Yeah, and it does look really good. I mean, it looks even better in person. I wish you as the viewer could be here to see it as well because, man, is it clean.
If you know anything about football players, you know they always get fresh cuts. I've said for years, football players are some of the best-looking specimens on this earth.
And I get one haircut a year, so basically polar ends of the spectrum here. But I'll be sure to key you all in when I go through my annual donation haircut phase as well.
But enough talking about hair. Let's get down to the predictions, and it's going to be an epic season once again. And should we just start right off at kind of the main predictions for each team?
Yeah, I'll let you lead and go in whichever way you see fit, and I'll be here to give my predictions as well. This time I actually thought about it a little bit beforehand, whereas last time I definitely remember I didn't think about the Chelsea predictions at all and went off rip. So this time it's a little bit more premeditated, and it's going to be hopefully better.
So I think if we think about predictions, season previews, and we've kind of had our own little podcasts over the last few weeks previewing briefly Bayern, Chelsea, but let's cut right to the chase. The viewers want to hear where we think our teams are going to finish. So we might as well start off finish in the table in respective leagues. You got Bayern in the Bundesliga, Chelsea in the English Premier League. Where do you have each team?
I have Bayern winning the Bundesliga. I held up my number one champions in the intro. And, I mean, something really catastrophic would have to happen to Bayern, I think, this year for them not to win the Bundesliga. It's truly the competition that the club dominates for the last couple decades, and it's the competition that the club cares the most about. All the higher-ups in the club always say that they care the most about the Bundesliga, and their success in the league really has shown that. I think other teams outside of Dortmund, I think Dortmund's going to be getting better, but I think other teams, Leipzig, Leverkusen, are going to be getting worse, and I just think Bayern will have too much power, too much consistency, and too much depth to not win the league again.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I have Bayern winning the Bundesliga, finishing at the top once again. You know, Dortmund losing Gittins, obviously going to really take a tumble. Leipzig losing Simons and Šeško. No, I kind of kid there, but I just think Bayern are clearly the cream of the crop in the Bundesliga and going to do all they can to easily win the league. I think it will be an easier win of the league this year as opposed to years past. And moving right along to Chelsea Football Club, I've said this already, Chelsea will finish third this season, one better than they did last season. If you recall, I did predict that correctly last season. So I'm going for 2 years in a row. I just think Chelsea are going to take a step forward. I think Liverpool will win the league, City come in second, Chelsea third, 4th through 20th. Check out next week when I post my full predictions for the EPL. But Chelsea are just going to be a strong team this year.
I actually have Chelsea coming in second, which I know is a bold, big prediction from me. And I sway back and forth with what I think about Chelsea in terms of how good they are, or maybe not how bad they are, but you know what I mean. And I feel like they're going to finish second in the league. I also have Liverpool winning. I think they're going to be far away from Liverpool. I think everybody in the Premier League is going to be far away from Liverpool. But I have Chelsea at second. I think City will probably take third. I think, I don't want to say, I can't say anything bad about Pep because he's amazing, right? But I do think that he's starting to get figured out a little bit. I don't think City will go through the slump that they went through last year. I think obviously getting Rodri back and making some key moves that they did, they will be better than they were last year. But I think Chelsea's going to have a really good year.
Love to hear that, and I know all the Chelsea fans listening will love to hear that. Might as well stay with Chelsea as we move over to the domestic cups, a super important part of the EFL in total. You got all these teams in lower divisions that are really going to want to work hard to play underdog, play the upset in a lot of these matches, whether it's the FA Cup or the EFL Cup, also known as the Carabao Cup for sponsorship reasons, of course. But Chelsea have not won one of these in quite some time, and if you've been a fan for them for a long time, you'll know that the FA Cup is something that a lot of fans love to win. So I think Chelsea will do better in the Cups this season. I actually have them getting to an FA Cup final, not quite winning, but getting to the final, and then going to a Carabao Cup quarterfinal. Just think they won't necessarily focus on that one as much. They do have Champions League to consider as well, and they'll want to finish top 4 in the league. But I do think they will get to a final in the FA Cup.
I don't have Chelsea winning the domestic cups. I don't think they're going to have a super solid year in the cups, just because, while I do think Chelsea actually is kind of a tournament team, I think that those matches will be some of the matches where Enzo is going to rotate a bunch, and there'll be some underdog team, like there usually is in these domestic cups in England. There's these underdog teams, even in Germany too, that just get hot at the right moment and take down one of the big teams who just let their foot off the gas a little bit. And I think that's what we're going to see with Chelsea. I think they're going to be a little bit more focused on the Premier League and the Champions League than they are going to be with these Carabao FA Cups.
Completely fair with your analysis on rotating. We've seen Enzo do that a lot last year. Could very well be the case. Moving over to Germany, Deutschland, we got the DFB Pokal and the DFL Super Cup, which just one match between Bayern and Stuttgart. Thoughts on those?
I think Bayern's going to win the Super Cup. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Nick Waldemata, Stuttgart star, potentially Bayern Munich player by the end of this transfer window. He wants to move to Bayern. The two clubs are at a stalemate right now. There was a rumored report that Seb Honis isn't going to play Waldemata in the Super Cup final. Don't know if I agree with that or not, or believe that or not, I should say, but I do think Bayern is going to maybe not steamroll Stuttgart in that final, but I think they're going to win it. And then as far as the Pokal, I've been kind of going back and forth in my head on this as well, because Bayern should win it. They're the most talented team in Germany. They're the best team in Germany. But I don't think they're going to. And I think it's just going to be a situation of bad luck, which is honestly kind of what it's been for Bayern in the Cup these last however many years. They have not had success in the Cup. If you remember last year, Manuel Neuer got a red card in the opening minutes, 18th minute, I want to say, of that match against Leverkusen. And Bayern actually played better than Leverkusen for the rest of the match and then ended up losing 0-1. So I could see some instance of either just a random team getting hot or Bayern just for whatever reason not winning that cup and striking out there. But I do have them winning the DFL Super Cup, which is actually renamed to the Franz Beckenbauer Cup this year. So that's going to be a first edition of the Franz Beckenbauer Cup.
Some knowledge that I didn't have, and because of that, Bayern will steamroll Stuttgart. Let me be clear, they will steamroll just because of the renaming. And I originally had them winning, but now I have them steamrolling. Early prediction, actually, 5-1 in that match against Stuttgart. What you mentioned, though, about cups, bad luck, that's the beauty of these domestic cups. You got underdogs that can upset the bigger dogs. And, I just think I agree. Bayern will probably want to win the DFB Pokal. I think they'll get to the semifinal. I just think something will happen, as you kind of mentioned. Could be something with Neuer, could be a red card, could be Von Kohn kind of having a snafu with some lineups, whatever the case. But I think they'll get to the semifinal. Maybe it's because they're focusing on another competition, the Champions League. What a competition that is in Europe, the top 5 leagues. Additional teams from other leagues as well that are qualifying right now. If you've been following, Satpayev, Chelsea product, will be coming in a couple of years. Scored again today with a penalty kick in the qualifications to get into the Champions League. But nonetheless, huge competition. Where do you have Bayern and Chelsea finishing?
All right, I have Bayern making it to the quarterfinals. I don't know what it is. I feel like there's going to be, we haven't had a clean season without injuries at the end of the year. Maybe this will be the year because Davies and Musiala won't be integrated back into the squad until later in the year. But I feel like Bayern still needs another attacking option to really, really push them over the edge. And I don't know if I see Company rotating those center backs enough to the point where we're going to have a healthy back line at the end of the year. I'm thinking quarterfinals. But I'm thinking Chelsea's going to make it all the way to the final and lose in the Champions League final. Again, I think Chelsea kind of is a tournament team, and I think they're going to be really hungry in the Champions League. I think they're building a deep squad with a lot of signings that they made where they'll have ability to keep guys fresh towards the end of the year. And I feel like they're going to make a good run this year in the Champions League, but not be able to close off the deal.
Do you know where the final is?
I don't know where the final is this year.
We might have to look that up because that'll be interesting. Maybe you can look that up right now.
We'll get a numbers crunch on that.
We'll have our producers look that up real quick. Danny's looking down right now, not because he's looking it up. Producers are obviously on it. But in terms of my prediction, I think Bayern and Chelsea will both make it to the quarterfinal. I just don't see them both making a deep run. I agree Chelsea are a good tournament team, as we've seen. They
playing each other or no?
No, they're both going to lose in the quarterfinal.
Okay.
So if they end up playing each other in the quarterfinal, clearly that prediction will be wrong. But yeah, I don't see either of them making a deep run. Quarterfinal is certainly not bad. You're winning one knockout round. It's nothing to slouch at, but I just think they'll both run out of steam. Luck certainly comes to play as well. But yeah, it'll still be fun, especially for me, Chelsea getting back into the Champions League. And those first 8 games will certainly be electric. And who knows, Bayern and Chelsea still might play each other in the league phase, which would be lovely to see.
Yeah, so 2 things for me, actually. One of the reasons why I also don't have Bayern going all the way is because I do think that they might be in a similar situation to where they were last year, where, they don't have all these guys healthy in the beginning of the year. They lose a match or 2 in the beginning that they shouldn't lose, and they end up having to, play that extra couple matches to even get into the next round with the new format. So I could see that happening. Second thing, the final is in Budapest, Hungary this year.
Budapest, okay.
Yeah, so it's no Munich, which would have been nice to win that last year, or even 2 years ago in Wembley for Kane. I mean, the stars seemed to be aligning and they didn't, so maybe this is the year that things will actually turn out.
Well, if there's one thing I do know about Budapest, it's that come May, it gets really cold there, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, by my prediction, it will for sure.
Which brings me to the next section of our predictions, the player-based section. And we'll start off with some player awards. This is a huge one, and the fans love to talk about, who the best players are, Ballon d'Or winners. We won't be talking Ballon d'Or because that's an award that you can't predict, rigged. We've had a lot of talk about that over the years. But Bayern and Chelsea, who will be the player of the season? Starting right off at the top, the best player on Bayern and Chelsea in 2025-2026.
I know I have to give one answer, but I really have two answers for both. I'm gonna say the I guess not controversial, but I'm gonna go with something that Chelsea fans might not like me saying, but I will always stand by it. Reece James, and not saying he's gonna score the most, assist the most, do all these things stat-wise. I just think he's the glue that holds that team together, and I think that similar to actually Marc Cucurella on the other side there. And I know Enzo likes to put James in the midfield, but without James, are you going to have Gusto playing right back? It's like a world of difference when he's on the pitch versus when he's not.
Totally.
He has clutch goals all the time that it seems like Chelsea's down and out, and James comes in and has a clutch goal. So I needed to fit James in somewhere, and I'm going to give him most important for Chelsea. For Bayern, I'm going to give it to Harry Kane. So tempted to say Michael Olise, but I am going to give it to Kane. I actually think, for sort of similar reasons, Kane is actually maturing into a leader for Bayern. You saw it many times last year where a guy would get knocked down and Kane would be right there defending them. And obviously, as one of the veterans on the team, he just kind of is becoming that leader while also producing, astronomical numbers, assisting in the lead up, the build up, playing defense when he has to. So I'm going to give it to Kane just because of his all around effectiveness, and also, Michael Olise is still such a young guy, although I really do think he's going to become a superstar this year as well.
Yeah, two good shouts. Kane certainly with his pedigree, James as well. Just don't think James will ultimately get enough minutes really any time in his career, but agreed with your analysis on what he can provide. For me, I'm kind of riding the wave here with some momentum. For Bayern, it's going to be Michael Olise. A guy we both love, a guy that I've loved a ton ever since they announced the signing. I predicted that he'd be their breakout player last year, be a guy that I think I actually predicted he'd just be their best player or whatever I had predicted. But
I think you did, and arguably that was true.
Yeah, and certainly he's going to ride that wave to continue to be better. I think Kane will always be there. I think Kane at times might either get rested finally by company or have some injury spells here and there. So I think Olise will just be a more consistent presence. And at times we saw that he wasn't as consistent, but I think he's just going to be strong. And, Cole Palmer for Chelsea had some downs last year. We saw the roller coaster being ridden by him. Finished so strong at the Club World Cup, and I think he's a player that's going to even more come into his own with Chelsea and with England over this year under Tuchel. And he's just going to show the world that he is one of the best players in the world, hands down. He's going to be way more consistent, and I think with all the attacking options Chelsea has, people are going to have to defend him less and not triple team him as much, and he's just going to dominate, and I can't wait to see that happen.
Yeah, you can always say Palmer. I mean, he's going to be good no matter what. And last year I feel like I set him for so many categories, so I'm kind of spicing this up a little bit. I'm adding a little something on it.
No, that's fair, and there's a lot of guys who deserve shouts, but I think at the end of the day, Palmer is the best player on the team, and will show that. But some of the key guys on teams in many years are younger guys, especially for Chelsea. We've seen that's their model. So I figured now we talk about a couple categories. I threw a couple young categories in here because Chelsea does have a lot of young guys. Bayern, not as much. So we're going to start here with best player on each team that is 21 years or younger as of now.
Okay, so for Chelsea, I'm going to give it to Gittins. I might be missing somebody because, honestly, it's hard to rack my brain of everybody's ages. But I'm going to give it to Gittins. I think that, while he isn't probably going to be a guy who plays all the time, I think he will have a nice impact for Chelsea this year. And then for Bayern Munich, I'm actually going to give it to Jonas Erbig. Not a lot of options to pick from for Bayern Munich. I believe Erbig is 21 right now. I don't think he's 22 yet, but I'm going to give it to Erbig. I think that, while Grandpa Neuer will still probably play most of the matches, and I love Neuer, so I say that affectionately, but, if ever Neuer is hurt, if ever Neuer does need a break, I think that Erbig's going to come in, and I think he's going to continue to develop. I love everything I've seen from him so far, and I think he might actually end up playing some important minutes for Bayern this year.
Yeah, that's an interesting call. I went with a guy, I don't know if you maybe didn't realize he's 21, but Pavlovic.
Yeah, that's fair.
He just, to me, is a guy that's going to get consistent minutes. Love him in the midfield. We saw he was injured at times last year, but he's bound to take another step forward. Key piece for Bayern, especially for their future. And I also went Gittins. Chelsea has a lot of options here, but he's been a guy that I've been so excited for on that left wing. I think he's the perfect winger for Maresca and what he wants to do. And I think he's already being forgotten about a little bit in the Chelsea fan base, which is, kind of crazy. Obviously, he hasn't played yet, but there's a lot of talk about other guys. So just think he's really going to bring some good play for Chelsea.
Fair. And Pavlovic, definitely a good answer. I might talk about this on another episode, but because I'm trying to gauge where Bayern fans are at, I'm personally, I'm not writing him off, but I'm starting to get a little bit worried about Pavlovic injury illness-wise. Like, he gets all these weird, almost undescribed or undisclosed injuries and illnesses. I mean, the guy broke his eye socket the other day, and now he's going to be out for 3-4 weeks, and it's like I said, I'm not writing him off. I think he did have a little bit of a down year last year compared to his explosive first season just because of all these injuries and whatnot. But I think when he's healthy, him and Kimmich will be the starting pair in that midfield, and I think there's no doubt he's going to be a great player for this team. But I don't know. It's just I'm getting a little, cautious about him.
Yeah, guys like that struggle with injuries, you never know for sure. But hopefully he ends up having a healthy year, and we'll see what happens there. I don't know if I had this in the Google Doc originally, but I decided to add a category for 19 and younger as well. Kind of just funny because Chelsea does have a lot of guys, Bayern less so.
Bayern has maybe nobody on the first team outside of Carl, but let me
And I ended up putting Carl because I think he's going to get some minutes this year and be a guy that can do some things for Bayern. And for Chelsea, I chose Jorrel Hato, the Dutch product from Ajax. Going to be a huge member of the Chelsea team this year, backing up for Cucurella as well as Levi Colwill in that left center back spot. Just think with what he can provide off the bench and then in some of these other rotated matches that he will get to start, I think he's going to be huge. Ton of experience for 19 years old. Has been playing for Ajax for 3 years, over 100 appearances. People don't realize that. Has captained the Ajax side. That's insane.
Okay, for Bayern, I'm going to go Carl just because I think he's the only guy under 19 that has a prayer of playing with the first team for most of these matches. I think what you said is right. I think he'll get a few minutes here and there, and he'll be fine when he does. I can't go with Horo. Is that how you say his name, Horo?
I think it's Jorrel Hato. Yeah.
Oh, Hato. Okay, yeah. I'd love to go with him, and I think he actually is good, like you said, but I can't go with him. I'm probably going to disclose why later on. Instead, I'll go with Estevao. He's under 19, right? He's 18.
Yeah, he's 18.
Yeah. Just a guy who is just so much raw talent and will honestly probably take a little bit to develop, but I think we'll see flashes of that talent this year.
Yeah, and I don't have him listed here at all. I just think they're going to ease him in. I think he has so much talent, and he's going to do so many wonderful things this year. But while I can, I'll just say I'm so excited for him. He's been finally revealed at Stamford Bridge, at Cobham on the grounds, taking number 41, the number he had at Palmeiras. Just so excited for what he can bring. but he's just so young. And some of these teams, you need experience, you need vets, you need guys that are old. And now we're going to talk about guys older than 30 years old.
Does Chelsea even have a single player that's 30?
They might. But who you got?
All right. For Chelsea, I'm going to go with the ghost of Thiago Silva because I think his leadership is still ingrained in this team. And for Bayern, I guess I'll go Kane if I said he's going to be their best player. But I think if you want to go real old grandpa style, you go with Neuer.
I agree with that analysis. And you're right. Chelsea does not have a player that's older than 30. Robert Sanchez is 27. I believe Tosin is also 27. Cucurella either 26 or may have just turned 27. I think he just had a birthday. But
that's crazy because we're 27. So nobody on Chelsea is older than us.
We are 27. That's a good point. Yeah, no, that's the crazy thing about sports for sure. I always hate getting older, and then most guys are younger. But, agree with your Kane shout. I think he's, my second best player on the year, so certainly makes the cut. He's, 32, 33?
I think he just turned 33 a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and then, I wrote down Enzo Maresca because he's a legend of the game, and I've seen some highlights of him when he was playing.
When he had hair.
I think he was a very useful midfielder in his day.
Very good, very good.
So now we'll move on to a very important and fun category, in my opinion. I love talking about this type of player. A guy that improves a ton year to year. And a lot of times this will be somebody that you don't expect. Sometimes it'll be somebody that dealt with injuries, finally gets healthy, plays well. But whatever the case may be, who do you think is going to really shine year over year?
As in most improved?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the reason why I couldn't say Hoto or whatever for the other category before for Chelsea, because this is also one that we're going to watch this back and we're going to be probably cackling about. But I'm giving it to this man on the basis of last year he wasn't even good enough to be on the team, okay? He was loaned out. So the floor is beneath the earth. And now I think his ceiling is going to be just above the floor of the earth.
Okay.
Is this making any sense?
I can't think of who this is.
I'm talking about Chalobah. I don't know if he's going or staying, but if he stays, I think he is actually going to get some minutes.
As of now, he might be their starting right center back.
That's what I'm saying. I think he's going to get some good minutes, and I think going from loaned out, not even wanting him on the squad, to getting some solid minutes, I think that's a good improvement. For Bayern, I'm going with Stanisic, which is maybe an interesting call. But he was injured for a large part of last year, especially at the beginning of the year. And while I do think his best position is right back, I think he's a very, very good right back, and I don't think that Kompany will play him at right back because I think Kompany just likes Slimer too much. He's such a utility guy. I think he'll be used at left back to fill in for Davies, Ito while they're out. I think he might get some minutes at center back, and again, can maybe get some minutes at right back for whatever reason. So I think Stanisic is just going to be a really solid kind of glue guy on that back line.
Yeah, that's a great call. Guy that's been injured, maybe hasn't played up to his full potential. Like the Chalobah shout as well, certainly when you are a guy that's been cast out by ownership, an academy product, and I do think he will be starting at right center back to start the year. I mean, it's him or Tosin, so you could argue that's one of Chelsea's weaker points on the team, but I like both those guys. I'm going with Pavlovic, a guy that I picked for my 21 or younger player, kind of including this because he battled so many injuries, and then once he came back, never was up to snuff, as they say, and really to his full potential. Just think he has a ton of talent in that midfield.
I like it.
And working with guys like Kimmich, Goretzka, whoever, I think he'll be so strong. And then you'll love this one. Some could argue that you can't improve with what he did at the Club World Cup, but let's base this on most of last year. Robert Sanchez.
I thought about picking him. I was so close to picking him.
Yeah, I just think he's going to do a lot of what he did at the Club World Cup. Do I think he's going to be world class as he showed in that PSG match? Probably not.
Yeah.
But if he shows that he's way more consistent, then certainly that's a massive improvement from last year when he's leading the league in errors.
Yeah, that was my thought too with Sanchez was, okay, last year he started off the year so rough that I think he had a lot of room to improve. And I think he'll be, like you said, not, as lights out as he was against PSG, but I think he'll be solid for a good amount of the year.
And let's certainly hope that's the case because Chelsea need it. But let's talk about some guys that go under the radar. Times in the season when your team is maybe playing worse, you don't know what's going on, you need a win, there's going to be guys that step up that you don't see it coming. And there's some guys that over the course of a year, you don't realize they're having amazing years. Underrated player of the season for Bayern and Chelsea, what do you think?
For Chelsea, I'm going to give it to a guy who I think is arguably Chelsea's best player, a guy who is always underrated, and that's Caicedo. I think people who are real Chelsea fans or people that watch a lot of Chelsea will see and understand how good he is, but he's just a guy who doesn't get talked about as much, compared to the likes of Palmer and, the guys who score a lot of goals. So I think Caicedo is arguably Chelsea's most important player, and I think he, for that reason, I'm giving him the underrated award. For Bayern, I'm going with Konrad Laimer, just because, again, I've talked about this a lot, but Konrad Laimer, natural midfielder, moonlighting as a right back, and he's done such a good job at right back that Company starts him there and views him as the starting right back. And Laimer and Olise on that right-hand side is such a delicious link-up that I think he deserves a shout there. I don't think Laimer is always the smartest in his positioning as a right back, but just the level of aggression and intensity that he brings to the pitch, I think really makes him underrated.
Yeah, I agree with both those shouts. For me, Caicedo will never be underrated, but the reason I appreciate it coming from you is because I do think in the world still he is being underrated.
Yeah.
So and that's why I think it still fits, and it's a shame. And hopefully after this year, more people will start to see. Those that think Declan Rice is better, for example. That's not the case. I think Caicedo will show that and continue to do that. For Bayern, I'm going Gnabry. I think a guy that has had ups and downs, but he shows up. He's consistent in terms of what he's giving you, if that makes sense. And I think he's going to have a pretty solid year. And in the same token, for Chelsea, I'm going Pedro Neto. I think was so strong at the Club World Cup. But over the course of the season last year, he actually was pretty inconsistent and had a lot of stinkers, to be completely honest. I think this year he's going to ride the wave of the Club World Cup, which is kind of becoming a trend, I'm realizing, for a lot of my picks. But I think that was just such an important stretch of time for Chelsea, and I do think that momentum will carry over for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I actually thought about putting Neto into that category as well because, like you said, Caicedo isn't underrated to people who really watch Chelsea, but he is, in my mind, in the footballing world, like you said. So I actually did consider Neto for that. Gnabry, interesting pick. I think you do know what you're going to get with Gnabry at this point. I do think there is a reason to keep him around on this team, even though he's massively overpaid for what he does. But he's a nice kind of utility guy for the attack. He can play behind a striker. He can play striker if you need him to. He can play on that left wing or right wing. And he can still score. He's still a very good scorer in my mind. I think maybe just the rest of his game has kind of fallen off a little bit.
Yeah, well, if he is overpaid, some would consider that to be the bust category, which we're going to move into now. And, I'm just going to start right off the rip here. I think Goretzka for Bayern will have a down year.
Bayern fans will love that. He's the most hated Bayern player for sure.
And I don't love doing it because I like the guy. I think time and talent to a certain degree will catch up with him at some point. I don't ever think he's going to be terrible. I just think in terms of a guy that's going to get a decent amount of minutes, he won't be as good as some of these other guys. I've already talked about Pavlovic and what I think he's going to do this year. You bring in Bischoff. You got Kimmich there in the midfield as well. I just think he's going to not be as good as them. And to me, that will be a bust compared to what he did last year. And I'll just go right to you before we even get to Chelsea. Thoughts on that, and then who your bust is for Bayern?
My thoughts are, first of all, like I said, Bayern fans are going to love you for that. Goretzka, very, very hated player. Another guy who's massively overpaid for what he is. But, I think Goretzka, I wouldn't say he's going to be a bust this year just because I am not sure about Pavlovic's health. Now, do you bring in Bischoff then instead of Goretzka? Who knows? I think this is going to be Goretzka's last season at the club. But, I don't know. I'm for Bayern for bust. I'm going to go with a guy who maybe won't be on the team come the season, Sasha Bouet. Backup pick is going to be Hiroki Ito if Bouet gets sold. Bouet I think Bayern overpaid for him. They paid 30-some mil for him, and I don't think he's going to play that much, and when he does, I don't think he's going to be anything special. And it's just unfortunate. I think he's a fine player, just not quite as good as you need to be at Bayern Munich. And then Hiroki Ito, I'm just not sure if he's ever going to be truly healthy or the same again. He's broken his foot 3 times now, and that's tough as a football player, especially as somebody who plays, I guess, really any position, but I feel like center back / left back, I don't know, the defending there, it's going to be tough, and I really hope that's not the case, but that's why I'm saying that. For Chelsea, this maybe will make you sad, but I am going to say Nico Jackson, and I don't hate the guy. Again, another guy who maybe won't be on the team, but I don't hate him, but I don't like him as striker. I think he could fit somewhere in a team somewhere, maybe as part of a 2-striker system, or maybe even at like a wing or something. There's certain aspects of his game I like. I like how he presses, but I think at this point with the additions of João Pedro and Liam Delap, I think that those two are going to just have a better year in terms of production than Jackson will.
Nico, if you're listening,
Subscribe.
I will always love you. As the great Whitney Houston once said, and I think you have the ability. I think if you stay and fight, you'll be rewarded. Real quick, though, let's say Nico is sold. Do you have anybody else who you think is going to have a down year?
Why don't you say yours first, and I'll think a little bit. Let me look through the squad list.
Guy can't go off the riff, apparently. No, I'm just messing, but this is unfortunate.
Mudryk?
I mean, just daggers to the heart here. That's just tough. That's tough. He is a bust, technically, but unfortunately, I'm going to go with Romeo Lavia for my bust. I just do not see this guy playing consistent minutes once again, and it's sad because I think he has a ton of talent. So this selection for me is not about a guy having less talent than expected. I just don't think he's going to see the pitch. And Andre Santos is a guy that's going to be more available.
Yeah.
Caicedo and Enzo are going to have strong years once again. Reece can play in the midfield as well. And when you're not available, you're just not having success. And it's unfortunate for Lavia.
Yeah, outside of Jackson, I was actually thinking of Santos, but I don't think he's going to be a bust. I think, if anything, it's just a crowded midfield. He might not play as much as you want him to, / he might not be quite as good as you want him to be, but I don't really think I could consider that a bust at this point.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Completely fair. And speaking of fairness, you maybe in the eyes of some people have not been fair to one Fabrizio Romano this year. A lot of criticism from you to him. But the business of Fabrizio is all about transfers. Breaking news, talking about these players that are signing with teams. Chelsea and Bayern both involved in a lot of those rumors. Some signings end up happening, and we've seen a few, but at the end of the day, season's over in 2026. You look back. Who's the player that you're going to say, man, am I glad we spent X amount of money on him?
First of all, on Fabrizio, I'm not going to go into my Fabrizio diatribe of the moral, ethical issues I have with the guy accepting money to inflate people depending on... Yeah, I'm not going to go into that. The one thing I will say, though, is annoying. I mean, how many times does the guy tweet the same thing over and over and over again?
Does he work with FIFA with all those ethics problems?
He might. No. Okay. Best transfer for Chelsea. I'm gonna go João Pedro. I really, really have been impressed with him so far, and I think he is going to blossom into the man you always wanted him to be as a Chelsea fan.
Ditto for me. I don't even need to add anything. João Pedro's my number one transfer.
For Bayern, I'm going with such a risky pick. One, because it hasn't happened yet. I'm going to say Nick Valdemata.
Ooh.
And I think it is going to happen, so I'm doubling down on my risk of, one, calling out a transfer that hasn't happened yet, two, calling on a guy who has had maybe half of a good season. But I do think that he could fill the 10 role while Musiala's out, and I do think that he could potentially be the next striker for Bayern when inevitably Harry Kane goes back to England, breaks the all-time Premier League goal record, and raises his lovely, lovely family in his home country.
Yeah, that's a good call, and I think ultimately it will go through as well. I'm going with Bischoff, and you'll notice if you've been watching this far into the pod, that a lot of my picks are connected. One player's worse, so then X player will be better. And with me believing Goretzka will have a down year, I think Bischoff will be key for Bayern. And I think you'll look back and say, we paid what? Did I see $300K for him?
Yeah, well, it was a free transfer. They paid the $300K for him to play in the Club World Cup.
Beautiful. So I think, and I don't even know how much he ended up playing in that, but I think he'll just develop into a guy that you can really count on if you are Von Kohn.
I think he played one half against Benfica, but I do think Bischoff has a very high ceiling. I think for him it's going to be about getting those minutes. It's going to be about company trusting him, and it's going to be about company surrendering to rotation this year.
Fair enough. We'll see what happens with him. Hopefully he gets a bunch of time. But now moving on to our last category, player statistics. We talked about who's going to be the best, the worst, but down to the nitty-gritty. Doesn't mean you're the best, but maybe you're getting statistics in a way that helps the team, whatever. Most goals, go.
Bayern, I'm going Harry Kane. Almost a no-brainer. I mean, unless the guy spends a lot of time injured, but the guy is a goal machine. He's a goal factory, and I think it's going to be Kane. For Chelsea, I want to say Palmer, and it probably will be Palmer, but I just got this itch right now for João Pedro. So my official prediction is João Pedro. I know Palmer will probably take penalties, and that'll help obviously for this category, but something about the spiciness of João Pedro's game in that Club World Cup has me amped.
Yeah, I love that shout, and I debated it. I do think if Pedro plays when Palmer's resting, that Pedro will take penalties. That's what he's known for, really good at pens. I went Palmer mostly due to the pens, also due to what I talked about before when I named him my number one player. I think he's just going to see less defenders this year and really be strong. I think he finished with most goals last season and then had that really poor stretch. So, take away that poor stretch and he's going to be dominating. And then, Kane. What more can you say about the guy? But I will say Kane needs somebody to deliver him the ball. And, for me, once again, that is Michael Olise providing the most assists for Bayern this season. Enzo Fernandez for Chelsea, the most. I think he had the most last year, but, man, I love Enzo Fernandez. With all these new options he's got, a non-Nico Jackson that's not finishing, a Delap, a Pedro, Palmer, could be a beautiful thing for him.
I'm going Olise for Bayern as well. I think the guy is just going to rack up the assists this year and honestly goals too, but especially assists. You got Kane in there. You'll eventually have Musiala, even Luis Diaz coming in. I think Olise is going to have a field day providing assists. For Chelsea, I'm going with Cole Palmer. Enzo's a good shout too, but I think I really do think Palmer is going to just have a ton of goals and assists, but I think he's going to have the most assists.
Yeah, it creates a ton of chances that guys just weren't finishing, so fair enough there.
Yep.
Will Olise challenge Muller's record?
No, not his Bundesliga record, but I do think Olise could end the year with 20-plus assists across all comps. I think it's likely he will. I think he did last year, actually.
Yeah, I certainly think that's possible. He's just such a talented player. So now we go to an important statistic. I think this shows you're an important player if you have this statistic. Most minutes across all competitions, a true workhorse for their team.
For Bayern, I'm going Kimmich. Kimmich never, ever takes a break, never is off the pitch, really never rests. But more importantly, he's always available. And some people say your best ability is your availability. And in the case of Joshua Kimmich, that is certainly the case. I think he missed one match last year because of an injury, maybe across all comps. So crazy stuff from Kimmich. I'm going with Kimmich there. And then for Chelsea, I'm going with Marc Cucurella. And partially because I don't think there's a lot of coverage there. But, last year, I don't know if Cucurella had the most minutes, but I know he had up there for the most, and I think he's going to kind of repeat that this year.
Yeah, it's certainly not a bad shout. With the signing of Hato, I think Cucurella will hopefully rest more, but he's still so key, so he's going to get most of your minutes in the big matches. I went Caicedo. With Champions League football this year, it's not like the Conference League where you're going to be able to rest more of these guys. I just think he's so key, and without him, Chelsea are clearly worse, so he's going to play a ton. I'm realizing now my pick here for Bayern doesn't necessarily match up with some of what I said earlier, but I went Harry Kane, and I think my logic at the time was that Von Cohn just ends up playing Kane way more than I think all the time. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens there. I don't necessarily love my pick there, especially if they do get Voltemade, but that's what I went with, and I don't feel like changing it now. So I'm going to say Kane.
Perfect. What's next?
What's next is a great category. A great category. And sometimes a misunderstood category, but it could be a fiery player, could be a too aggressive player, could just be a bad player. Most yellow cards.
I'm feeling good about my predictions for both teams for this one. Famous last words, especially as we'll be likely watching this over again. Most yellow cards for Bayern Munich, Konrad Laimer brings the aggression, brings the heat. I think we'll play most matches under company. And for Chelsea, I'm going with Caicedo. Caicedo, I feel like gets a lot of yellow cards. I feel like he's going to play a ton of minutes across all comps, and that's really why I'm going with him.
Caicedo's the right pick, the only pick. I think
Cucurella could be in the discussion.
He could be for sure. Chelsea are going to probably lead the league once again in yellow cards. Pedro gets a ton. Delap gets a ton, kind of because they're more fiery and do those sorts of things. Caicedo, it's just because he has a reputation, even though it's not true at all. By the way, he shouldn't actually be leading in yellow cards. If I was the ref, Caicedo would get no yellow cards. But nonetheless, I'm going to Upamecano for Bayern. And I think the only reason I chose this was I think I looked up that he led the team last year. So
could be.
Let's just hope for year over year, same for him. Although if you're a fan, I guess maybe you wouldn't want that. But we'll see what happens there. Now on to our last category here. Kind of randomly thought of this one, and it's going to be really tough to track. I only really could find last year's stats by some random, I think it was StatMuse that gave this, and it was just in league, so maybe we'll just keep it to in league. But most goals for the teams off the bench. Your 12th man.
Okay, for Chelsea, I think it's not cut and dry, but it's more clear to me than for Bayern at this point. I'm going to go with Liam Delap for Chelsea because I don't think he's going to be an everyday starter, but I do think he's going to score a lot when he comes in. For Bayern, it's tough. I actually put, again, just a shot in the dark here, Nick Valdemata, but he could, if he comes, which, again, he's not even here yet, he could kind of come in off the bench for Kane, for Musiala, but also would be starting for Musiala for a while. So it's a tough one to pick. But I'm gonna go with Nick Valdemata.
Yeah, both those picks make sense. I totally agree with you on Chelsea. I also went to Lop. Think that he at times will come off the bench as a striker if Pedro starts. Other times he'll start. But yeah, it's tough to lead with this category. The winner is going to be 3 goals probably. It's not even going to be a lot. And so that's kind of why I went with him. And I went Gnabry for Bayern. I just think
not a bad pick.
With Diaz, Elise potentially starting on the wings, Gnabry might just come off the bench a lot.
I think he will, yeah.
So I think he's a guy that in the Bundesliga can score still possibly 10 goals this year if he's my underrated player of the year. So if 7 of those are off the bench, that's insane. But it could happen.
No, that is a really good pick. Is that it for categories?
That is it for categories, unless you have something up your sleeve.
No, I don't have anything up my sleeve. I think this was a great discussion and a great episode, and I'm sure everybody viewing will agree.
I would say if I'm not 90% accurate, at least I'd be shocked.
I can't wait to watch this back after the fact.
Let's hope it's a happy watch back, to be honest. If it's sad, that means both our teams are in trouble.
True, and I had some crazy predictions last year, so I'm sure there's going to be some fun stuff in this one. But thank you for watching this. Thank you for checking out the YouTube channel. Thank you for checking out Always Bayern Chelsea everywhere and subscribing, of course. And stay tuned because we got a lot of cool, good stuff coming. The season's starting soon. It's a great time to be a fan. Hey, we're 10 days away from the Super Cup match for Bayern, so things are going to be kicking up very, very soon. And check out all the recent collaborations we just dropped. That's really the last thing I can think of to plug.
Soon and very soon, as a great Bible hymn says, if you're a church guy at all. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
There we go. Well, I'll send us off now. Mia San Mia.
Up to Chelsea.